I am Pastor John Hildebrand. We want to continue our study. This is lesson number 2. I want to begin by asking a question. Have you ever felt, while you were reading the Bible, trying to study, that you felt that you were looking at a big pile of many little pieces and that was supposed to be one big picture? I know for myself, and I know there are many people that read the Bible, they're good readers, they read through the Bible, but the challenge usually is they don't know what it means, how does it all come together when they read about the different beasts in the book of Daniel, the different beasts and symbols in the book of Revelation. At the end, when they're all done, they kind of look at it like this and they don't know exactly where does everything fit. So what we want to do in these lessons is we want to, in the most practical, simple manner, teach you basic lessons that will help you understand the Bible better. And I'm thinking about people that perhaps don't read their Bible very much, maybe are not very enthusiastic about reading the Bible, that feel like you can never understand the Bible. Maybe I can be a little bit of a help. Maybe I can encourage you a little bit through these lessons for you to study on your own and search the scriptures, pray that the Lord will help you. So usually, when somebody wants to put a puzzle together, this is what they usually do. I've seen my children do this. I've done it myself, and I think probably most people do it. The easiest thing when you have a puzzle with 5,000 pieces, the first thing or the easiest thing to do is if you find the edges and the corners and you put the outside ring together, that helps you to know that this is how wide and this is how long this puzzle is. And that whole pile belongs inside of this. So the Bible is the same way. If we find out where it begins, where's the edge, where does it end, that helps us to know that all the rest of the symbols, all that we read in the Bible belongs inside. And once the pieces are all put in place, we have one beautiful picture that we know that God has given to humanity. And that's what we want to try to do. So we want to study the generation of the serpent. I want to read my text in Matthew chapter 12, verse 34, where Jesus says, "O generation of vipers, how can ye being evil speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh." Here Jesus talks about a generation of vipers, or the generation of the serpent. And so I will explain in this lesson and in the coming lesson what that means. So we want to look at the different beasts in the Bible. And I want to begin with a beast in Revelation, and I want to work backwards and just show you how many beasts the Bible actually talks about. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 11, this is where the Apostle John sees a vision, and the seventh angel is revealing or explaining to him what the eighth beast is. And then in verse 11 he says, "And the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition." So I'm going to make certain statements, certain points, and if you're very interested in knowing the Bible, I would encourage you to take a notepad and just write down different points that I'm going to mention that's going to help you later bring the whole puzzle together. One very important thing is the Bible only talks about 8 beasts, not 9, 8 beasts. This is important. Once beast number 8 comes along, that means there will be no 9th beast. This is very important. So we're going to go back and remember the number 8. So I just want to show you where these beasts are, and later we'll read the scripture. But in this lesson, I want you to just know when the Revelation talks about 8 beasts, I want you to know which beast he's talking about so you can read your Bible on your own and know, okay, when he talks about 8 beasts, this is one of them, this is one of them. And so in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, the prophet Daniel had visions and a dream and visions in chapter 7. And then he sees the four winds driving upon the sea, and then four great beasts come up out of the sea. One was a lion, a bear, a leopard, and a dreadful and terrible. These are four of the eight that Revelation chapter 17 is talking about. These are the first four, and we're going to explain this later. And then we go over into the book of Revelation, chapter 12, I think it's verse 3. It talks about a dragon that appeared. That's beast number 5. And then we go over into Revelation chapter 13, verse 1. John sees a beast coming up out of I think it's the earth, which is beast number 6. And then in the same chapter, verse 11, he sees a lamb-like beast. And then in chapter 17, he sees the 8th beast. So something very interesting when you look at this, you see all these different heads, you see them all in the 8th beast. So we're going to explain how this works. So Jesus talks about a generation of vipers. And I'm going to give you an example here so you can understand this better. If you look at the serpent in the Garden of Eden, in the very beginning, that's where the serpent tempted Eve. And so when you read this verse and you read Jesus' words 4,000 years after this event, he talks about a generation. He talks about people. He says, you, Pharisees, Sadducees, you are a generation of viper, of a serpent. So when you look at it this way, that verse makes a whole lot more sense why Jesus would have called them a generation of vipers. Or they were a generation that had obeyed the serpent that tempted Eve. That's what that is saying. And so I want to show you an example here. The Bible, in the very beginning here, I want to read that verse in Genesis chapter 3 and in verse 15. Just bear with me, we'll go slow, and we'll repeat ourselves maybe in the following lessons just to make things very clear. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, it talks about this is where Adam and Eve had fallen into sin. The devil had tempted them. They had disobeyed God, and they had fallen into sin. So this is what this symbol shows. And then it says here, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman. It talks about between the serpent and the woman. And then it says, and between thy seed, the serpent's seed, and her seed. So it talks about two different seeds. So this is very important. This is where it begins. This is the beginning of the serpent. This is where the serpent tempted Eve, and this is the beginning of the generation of the serpent. This is just like the edge of the puzzle. So I want to show you another example. Jesus a lot of times taught by very practical examples. And I want to show you something here. I hope this is clear enough. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15 talks about a seed. This is a seed. I just took a picture to just illustrate this. This is a corn seed. Let's say the world today has stood approximately 6,000 years. Let's say this is 6,000 years from where the seed was planted until we have a ripe, full-grown corn stalk. Okay? If you understand this process, you will understand the beast, the first temptation, and how we have an 8th beast in the book of Revelation. It started just like this. It began by one temptation, and it ends up in an 8th beast that the Bible tells us in Revelation chapter 14, the vine of the earth is ripe, the grapes are fully ripe. So we have a beginning where it talks about a seed, and we have an end where it talks about something being fully ripe. It talks about the vine of the earth being ripe in Revelation 14, verse 18. So it's just like a seed that began here and it ends when it's ripe. So this corn stalk will go no further. It won't grow any taller. It won't get any more leaves. It'll stop right here because it's fully grown, it's ripe. So I want to give you a little illustration, a little example with this. Let's say this is 6,000 years. We know that the lifespan of one human has only, a certain amount of years. So when this was given in the time of Adam and Eve, they lived during the time this was given, this was talked about. Okay? So let's say they died off here. The people that lived in this period understood what Adam and Eve understood. But they knew that there was a lot inside of this prophecy that had not been revealed. So people that lived in this time period already understood by what their forefathers had handed down to them, and they understood the past. But they did not understand what was all coming, but they knew that something was coming. This is why a lot of times in the Old Testament we have the prophets. They knew what had happened before them. They knew what was happening in their time. And they knew that something was going to happen in the future, but they did not know exactly what was going to happen. Because as time went on, the seed was developing through time. Just like a cornstalk, it developed. It got one leaf, it got two, it got five, and then so on. So this is how the serpent began, exactly the same way. So when you look at the different beast, for example, when you look at the beast, you see here we have 7 heads, and we have a serpent that began, that tempted Eve. You see it wrapped around the tree, and then we see this going into the water. And then we see the first head coming out, and then we see another head, and then we see another head, until all 7 heads are out, and all of a sudden we have an 8th beast where all the heads are out. So when you look at this is exactly the same thing. So I'm just trying to present it in such a way where anybody could say, okay, now I understand. So it doesn't matter which beast you're talking about or you read about. It's always the same beast. It's just different time periods, different stages, and it's not, for example, in this time, all these were not developed. So the people in here understood this, but they didn't understand all that was going to happen in the future. The people in the time of this head understood what had been, but they did not fully understand what was to come. So the people that live at the very end, when the cornstalk is fully grown, they understand everything that has happened because they can just simply look at the history. So when you look at the 8th beast, the people that are going to live here in this time period are going to understand more than anybody else has ever understood. Why? Because they're smarter? Because they're more spiritual? No. Because they live in the time where the cornstalk is ripe, and they can simply go to the plant and they can count the leaves. They can look at they can look at how many grains is on there. They can look and see how tall it is, and they can simply just look at the history of what has happened all through the ages, and they know because they're standing in time. They have an advantage of their time, and they know exactly what has happened through time. So these people in this time period did not fully understand. They knew something was coming, but they did not fully understand what was going to happen. But the people here will understand everything because they stand in the time where the vine of the earth is fully ripe. So when you look at the different beasts that we see in this picture right here, this is exactly what that is. The Bible tells us it began with a seed. It began with a seed right here. The seed of the woman, we're going to study the seed of the woman, which is Jesus Christ. And there's the seed of the serpent. So it began with the seed. We are a seed. So there is a generation. Jesus talks about a generation. So there are only 2 generations. There is a generation of the serpent. Those are all the ungodly, all those that yielded to the serpent. They are a generation of disobedient people that yielded their lives, their members, to the serpent. And then there is a generation that have stood and that have held on to the promise that was given to Eve, which was Jesus Christ. And so we have 2 bodies of people that began in the Garden of Eden, or right when they fell into sin, that's where 2 bodies of people began. And so, another very important point, the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelation evolves itself around Genesis 3:15, the enmity, the war, the conflict between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. So I've given you a few points, and in the following lessons, we're going to continue in this very direction and study different things and show you where they belong and how this all comes together at the end. So I'm going to stop here. May the Lord richly bless you, and then we'll see us next time.